There we go. Hi, everyone. Sarah and Teresa here for our video touch base for our newsletter. And we wanted to spend just a little bit of time. I'm not sure where this conversation will go. We'll try to be mindful of our time because we both have a lot of feelings about this. But at the time of recording this, some of you may be familiar with comments that were made at a recent summit by a CEO and multimillionaire, Tim Gurner. And I want to take a moment just to recap some of the things he said and then talk about why it's so problematic, and also to just be aware of how might this kind of belief and thinking show up in your organization?
Mm-hmm.
How might that be contributing to employee engagement, productivity, everything that we're trying to accomplish? So the long and short of it is, Tim Gurner, he was speaking at the Australian Financial Review's Property Summit. He's a property developer, CEO, multimillionaire, right? His net worth is over 500 million. This is just important context. Basically, what he is saying is that we need to see unemployment rise. Right now in Australia, it's 3.7. It has to jump to 40-50% because, as Gurner said, employees have gotten too arrogant and have forgotten that they work for the employer and not the other way around. They're just not productive enough for his liking. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. Now, you might be listening to this and going like, well, that's some BS, and I would never want to work for him. And there's a little bit from my perspective that I feel like he's saying the quiet part out loud that we kind of will see in other ways people talk about. Sometimes we'll see people in positions of authority say things like, people just don't want to work these days. They just don't want to X, Y, and Z. And so we wanted to just talk about why this is really problematic, and also the fact that the workforce has changed. As Teresa, as you and I have talked about, a lot of people, as a result of the pandemic, have decentralized or are trying to not have work be literally the only thing that's in their life. And so we just wanted to have a conversation about it. So yeah. So what comes up for you, Teresa?
Yeah. Gosh, what isn't coming up? I mean, honestly, like listening to a comment like that, when we think about the reality for the people doing the work, which is largely stagnant wages,
Yeah.
benefits that have not kept up with rising costs, right? Their benefits are being cut left and right. And I think a lot of folks feel, and I would certainly support these feelings, that if one of us is experiencing stagnation, maybe all of us should be
Yeah.
experiencing stagnation. It's extremely painful and extremely unethical to keep raising the standard of living for the people at the top, that it is this self kind of protective circle at the very top, while everyone else below just has to figure it out, just
Yeah.
has to work harder for this lifestyle where um, folks are wanting for nothing at the expense of other people who are missing many of their basic needs.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that I can't help but think about in this equation is um, this is also making me think of a client recently who I think did a nice job exemplifying the opposite of this when they said, um, things are going really well for us right now. There are times that things don't go very well, and we want our team to know that reducing pay or letting people go are the absolute last things we're going to do. They had a list of things that they would adjust before it ever got to the level of the most vulnerable employees in the system. And that's been sticking with me,
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
past week, of the clarity of purpose of that, the amount of care that's being taken, the transparency of what really matters. Um, I, you know, it's I I think this is some of what circulates a lot on social media and isn't going away anytime soon. The wealth of knowledge about the disparity
Yeah.
between the top fill in the blank percent, 3%, 1%, 5%, whatever. Um, that knowledge isn't going away, and it
Mhm.
continues to agitate, folks at all the other levels of that of society.
Yeah, yeah. And just as like a reference point,
Yeah.
and this employment is from an article written by James Downey, so I want to give him credit for it. But and this is specifically to the US. So from 1978 to 2021, according to the Economic Policy Institute, economic productivity grew by more than 60%, which is substantial. And yet, typical workers' wages, which in previous decades would normally match that, right? If we were more productive, then our wages would normally increase kind of in a similar vein. But so productivity has increased 60%, and the workers' wages has increased just 18%. However, the wages of the top 1% of our earners grew 385%, with CEOs being paid more than 1,000% in some sectors. Obviously, we know that this isn't true in every organizations, but right. And so, so it's no wonder, right? Like, and the thing that I'll say is, we get Teresa and I and our colleagues get this incredible front row view for organizations. We always lovingly say we see the bad, we see the good, we see the bad, we see the ugly, but we also see the amazing. And the companies that are figuring out, the companies that are thriving, the companies that aren't only achieving a lot from an output perspective, but are doing so in a way where the team members feel really good about it, where engagement is high, where turnover is low, is the ones where the company is taking care of the people, period. That is quintessentially the thing that is such a clear separator. And and I also want to just take a moment to offer this perspective. And I suspect that this conversation might push some people, could impact who wants to work with us. But at the end of the day, we're here to reduce harm in the workplace, period. Like, that's what we're doing. And but when it's tough and frustrating when we hear people say things like people don't want to work. No, people don't want to be exploited. People don't want to have work be the only thing in their lives. People don't want to have to tolerate working in a toxic situation for a toxic boss, right? And people are changing, right? They also have access to more opportunities. You see more entrepreneurial behaviors happening. People are able to have more resources, and that's only going to accelerate as AI accelerates. People are going to have access to way more opportunities to create their own wealth. And the thing that I would say, and obviously this is complex and there's layers to this. One, if you are in a position of power and authority and you feel this way, I promise you, your team members feel that they don't feel appreciated. Like, if there's some part of you that feels they're there for you, they're transactional, they're pawns, they're a number, I promise you, your people feel that on some level. Because when we think a certain way about people, it changes how we treat them, right? Which is comparison to the people who are very genuinely people first. The people feel it. And it's not just anecdotal. We do research, we do analysis, we get to be in conversations. The way people talk about the culture and the leaders is very different in those organizations where they're taken care of versus the ones where they're not. It's very, very clear. And so one of the things that we've been talking about a lot with groups is this idea, and I want to give credit to our colleague, Dr. Chris Wildermuth, of this idea of when are we acting from authority versus when are we acting from leadership? And ultimately, the question is, why should people follow us, right? Like, if we think of leadership as influencing people without coercion, followership is an active choice to say, I follow you. So I just would invite people to reflect on and go, as an organization, why would people say yes to your organization? Why would they say yes to staying? If coercion was off the table, if they had other opportunities to choose from, why would they say yes to your organization? Why would they say yes to you? Sorry, I just went on a bit of it's just real frustrating.
I loved every part of it. I was hoping you would keep going, to be perfectly honest. I was like, get it. I think that point about coercion is really essential for folks to consider. and especially folks with formal power and authority, how do I rely on coercion
Mhm.
versus how do I experience a power with, or more of a cultivative leadership style? I think that's a really important reflection. Um, Something that was coming up for me as I was listening to you is um, I can't help but consider how stifled understanding is about when and how humans do their best work.
Yeah.
Because as you were describing, I'm thinking the teams we serve where people describe the culture in very, um, with an element of warmth, where they feel like they belong, where they feel cared for and are willing to care for others. Those are highly productive
Yeah.
groups.
Yeah.
They are not working more hours than the
Mhm.
folks who are being coerced and um, under someone's control all the time, right? Like they're likely working similar hours or even less, but being more productive doing it. So, I'm just inviting anyone out there who's struggling with that concept. It's very linked to feudalism for me. I
Mm.
related to uh, thinking that you have domain over someone, that they are
Mhm.
tied to you no matter what. There's a real feudalism element.
Mhm.
There's certainly
Mhm.
a slavery
Yeah,
hangover
there is.
in there for me, right? Of you belong to me, like
Yeah. Know
that
your
entire
place.
lie.
Yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
right. Work harder or else,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this on some hand, right? That's I don't know if it's one of the most offensive parts of what that mega rich CEO is saying, but this idea of know your place or I will
Yeah.
make it hurt for you.
Yeah.
Like that's a very unhealthy dynamic for society to thrive in.
Yeah. Yeah. And the question we should always be reflecting on is like, what might we be doing that's contributing to that, right? What are the
Yeah.
ways in which and again, Teresa and I've hopped on here, we've talked about how we've been hearing an increase of people saying language like entitlement and right. And so we're noticing this, and I think it's always been
Hmm.
there. I don't think it's an increase. I think we're just like we're picking up on it in a different way right now. And just to reiterate, uh the world is changing, folks. I don't know how to say that. Not for, everyone's at different places, but
Hmm.
3 years of trauma, 3 years of
Hmm.
substantial loss, and often for many of us, loss of life, it changes you.
Hmm.
And and as we've talked in previous videos, yeah, we're seeing a shift of how the younger generation is viewing their relationship with work, but it's not just them. Like we are seeing this throughout.
Yeah.
And so, so the question that always comes up for me when I hear people say people don't want to work, maybe that's true for some, and like no judgment, no fault, right? Like we've only got
Yeah.
this one life. How do you want to spend it?
Yeah.
But the question that always comes up is it that they don't want to work, or is it that they don't want to work for you?
Mm.
And how do we continue to create environments where people will continue to show up, where people will continue to feel seen and heard and protected and continue to bring their best selves?
Hmm.
And that rarely happens from a place of power over, right? So I say this with love: just because you have authority doesn't mean you're a leader. It's what you do with that authority that can be an act of leadership. And I'll just leave you with this question of why should people follow you? Why should they join your organization? Because we're humans and we just, I don't know, we deserve dignity and respect and pay and support. And yeah, you're paying people, but I look at it the opposite. People are literally giving us their most precious commodity, which is
Mm.
time, period. Like
Yeah.
that, I try to never to take that for granted as a business owner, that Teresa, you're giving me essentially time away from your kids, time, right, from your own recovery. And I think sometimes we lose our way um, in this capitalist society. So curious to hear your thoughts, folks. What comes up for you? We'll be sure to link the video. So for those of you who haven't heard it, um, And yeah, and these are the kind of conversations we need to be having if we're going to be real about creating work environments that, again, are productive without being equally destructive. We have to look at what's in the shadows that's not being said or what's being said out loud, and are we okay with that? I know I'm not. So, all right, my friends, our friends, thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.